Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk through how AI tools may be used to help HR leaders try and figure out what does a future state look like when thinking about different kinds of roles, and then how to break those roles down, rebuild them, and actually create the new roles moving forward. Realistically, what this means is you're probably going to see kind of huge turnover of those traditional roles and actually probably a reduction in total number of open positions, but they're actually going to kind of roll into new types of roles moving forward. So what I'm trying to do here is show you how I would go about actually figuring this out if I was going through this process of analyzing an overall employee headcount to try and understand the impact that AI is going to have on the total roster. What we're doing here is the ultimate outcome is to figure out the overall compensation and AI investment of an organization, what the current roles are and how they transition to future roles, then think about the transition plan. So thinking through, in this example that I'm going to walk through, we have 12 employees. What roles do those employees then take in the future, and which of those employees are not going to have a role in this new world? So it's kind of a scary situation, but I really just want to give a full transparent view of what is probably going to happen in the next couple of years. And actually, if you're in the market and you're trying to figure out how do I and make sure I've got the right skills, hopefully this is going to give a bit of an insight into the types of training that you could do in order to ensure that you're fully equipped moving forward to actually operate within this new world of very AI first hiring and retention. So what I did here is just build a pretty basic overview of the process that I would go through. So essentially vibe coded most of this, but kind of built the models based on what I've done in the past and what I would do if I was working with a client today and they're trying to figure out how do I think about my current team and how do I leverage the team to improve efficiency overall and ensure that we're kind of responding effectively to the impact of artificial intelligence. And there's several different steps that I would kind of go through as I broke this down. So you want to start off with your current roster, review the existing employees that you currently have, summarize the roles that they do, and actually benchmark their current headcount. Look at the job description of each of those roles. You look at the job description for each of the roles of those existing employees, and actually break down that job into a series of tasks. And then within those tasks, you can actually start to quantify how much of that task is likely to be automated. In this example, you'll see it's very basic. We're essentially using the OpenAI API as our analyst. So it's not going to go into as much depth as had someone done a multi-week or multi-month project, but hopefully it's going to show you some kind of very high level summaries. We then look at the kind of level of automation that we can expect and what that means then for future full-time equivalent workforce. And then as we then go to the other side of things, we're going to take those tasks, group them back together into new roles and show you what those new job profiles are going to look like. And then the view that is really going to go to finance and the executive team is the compensation before, compensation after, and where the company needs to invest in AI and AI tools and training, and then what the transition plan would be over months or years in order to get the company from where they are right now to where they will be in the future. So first of all, we're going to load our current roster. Now, I will include the prompts that I've used. So if you want to reproduce this with your own data set, feel free. I don't think I'll include the full GitHub repo because it's a pretty basic Flask app using Python on the back end. But if you are interested, reach out and I'm happy to kind of explain a little bit more about how I went through this. Here's our current roster. You can see it's a 12-person team. I kept it very simple just to minimize the amount of waiting we'll have to do. But you could do this with 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees. The difference is going to be how long each of the steps takes. But you can see it's distributed across different departments, different job titles. What we then do is break the role summary down. You can see because each individual role is kind of a one of one, we just have one employee for each job title, and then the departments have different numbers of people. What I've done here is created a separate data set with job descriptions. So we're actually joining the job description onto the role. You can see for the role, which employees currently participate in that role, and then what are the responsibilities and required skills. And so this is all kind of just joining different data sets together. The next step is to actually look at the task load. So this is really the classic work breakdown structure. You've probably done this in the past if you've worked in HR for any length of time, where you're actually looking at a current role and the amount of time it takes to accomplish each of the main tasks within that role. From here, we're really just pulling this from the job description, but you can see how if you have a deep capability to analyze the different roles across an organization, you can really start to figure out what is the estimated hours per employee for each of the tasks that each individual is doing, and then what are the total hours per week that the organization as a whole is spending doing that task. Again, it's everything is kind of a one of one, so we're not really seeing, I think, what you would see at 100 or 300 or 1,000 person organization, but you can actually start to see we've broken this down very simply into 3 different tasks per role and the estimated number of hours that that person is spending per week doing those kind of tasks. Now comes the kind of more complex part. And this is definitely open to interpretation. And it's actually where a lot of the research is going to come from. In this case, what I'm using is the OpenAI's GPT 5.1 model, just the mini model. So it's hopefully going to be a little bit quicker. But all we're doing is sending each of these tasks. And what we're asking is, based on the task name, what is the likelihood that this task is going to be automated in the future? And so really we're taking a very simplistic approach and saying, okay, if there's a 70% chance this task is going to be automated, let's automate away 70% of it. So the future requirement for that is going to be only 30% of what the employee is currently doing. And we've done that across all the different tasks here. You can see the breakdown for a lot of people that watch these work in HR. So you might look at employee relations support, and that's only 35% of that's going to be automated. Maybe you're automating some of the kind of tickets, or maybe there's a little bit of self-service, but a lot of that is still going to be one-on-one HR business partner directly to employee or employee's manager in order to make sure that you're actually managing the organization effectively. Whereas org planning and analytics, maybe that's automated away 70% and you're spending less time actually getting into the weeds and doing that manually, because you can actually just get good data and automate a lot of that yourself. But the key takeaway here is the type of task determines how much automation you're going to see. Feature development is kind of still only 30% automatable. Code reviews and mentoring, maybe a lot of the code reviews are able to be automated using test suites that use AI to actually identify defects in the code. So you're looking between 85% automation and as low as 30%. But almost every task is going to be impacted by automation in some way. We just want to break that down. Next, I'm going to break down the future full-time equivalent requirements. So here we're taking this kind of task breakdown and actually looking at, given this list, what is the impact going to be on our total FTE requirement for each of the roles that we currently have in the organization. And here's where you can see the real impact. And this is going to be really important for the next step as we're going to start to group the job profiles together. The last example I gave was senior software engineer. You can see you're going from 32 hours a week to 19 hours a week. Ignore the decimal points. Anyone that works in engineering will know that I just haven't truncated the values here. But essentially, you're cutting out quite a lot of the senior software engineer's role for each individual person. And so you might still need kind of one person to do this role, but they're going to be employed 13 hours a week less of actually productive time. So if you think over a 10-person engineering team, maybe 3 or 4 of those engineers will no longer be required. And that's where the efficiency saving from AI is going to come from. It's not necessarily that it's going to eliminate roles completely. And so you can see it kind of across the organization. In HRBP, we're going down from 36 hours a week to less than 12 hours a week. And you can start to see where these things are going to be concerning. And so what you then want to start to do is think, okay, given all of the different tasks and the level of automation that these tasks are going to go through, how do we then group these tasks into new roles that are going to take advantage of the human part of the role, but also automate away all of the things that can be automated. So you're really thinking through, what is the future job profile going to look like? And this is where the call takes a little bit more time, because what it's trying to do is kind of break down these roles, look for underlying similarities across the different roles, and then kind of group them back together and then come up with some kind of compensation estimation for what that new role is going to pay, and then also what kind of AI tools are going to be needed for that. So already you can see we're going from 12 roles to 5, and that's because we're grouping the roles together based on similar tasks. So you have this AI-enabled revenue manager, and so this is creating a new role, and I just want to really highlight this point. What we're not doing is saying we don't need these people in the organization. We're actually saying these are all the tasks that currently take place, and this is how we can regroup the tasks using AI to help support and build the new roles that are going to be more important moving forward. So this AI-enabled revenue manager is probably going to replace a lot of the sales roles that we have. you can see that compensation is 130,000. We've got 24 hours a week actually assigned. You know that the utilization of someone is going to be somewhere between 50 and 90% most probably. And so that feels about right for an individual role. And you actually see all the different responsibilities that this person is going to do. So we're combining account executive and customer success manager here, which, if you've worked in one of these fields for a long time, you might think that's not possible. But when you start to think about how you may automate some of the tasks that you do and that are more routine, the question becomes, can you actually expand the scope of the individual leveraging more AI? And this may not happen tomorrow, but over the next couple of years, we're probably going to see more and more of this kind of approach happening. For HR, where I think a lot of viewership comes from, we have this AI-powered people and HR partner. Again, we're combining HR BP and people operations work. And what we're doing here is actually creating new responsibilities where we're using AI tools to help support the HR organization. This still requires a human to actually implement certain aspects, but you're going to be using these kind of examples. This is, again, just pulled from OpenAI. You can see different types of AI engagement surveys, AI modules within the HRIS, maybe some kind of workflow automation using Zapier. You can see how very quickly you can get to a point where a lot of the kind of human aspects that have traditionally been done can now be completely replaced. And so what we're going to do next is then take a look at compensation analysis. We've estimated what the compensation of each of these roles is. We've looked at the potential spend on AI tools. I think this seems very high for a lot of these, but we're just going to roll with it and just see what we get at the end. Again, if you were running this yourself, you're probably going to do kind of deep research on the different tools that are available based on the individual problems that you're seeing most likely in the organization, and probably going to be a little bit more conservative in how you reallocate these tasks, because you may not necessarily want to automate everything in one goal. You're probably doing more of a kind of a step change with that. But we'll wait for this to come back, and then we'll see the kind of comparison of kind of before and after compensation. You can actually see by each individual role. So you can see here, we're actually cutting down from 1.8 million in compensation and 100,000 in AI tools to 640 and 105, more than a 50% reduction. If you think about how finance is managing the organization and headcount costs being one of the biggest drivers, you can very quickly see how this can become a very attractive business case. And so what's going to be really important is understanding how feasible this actually is and what the roadmap would be to actually get there. It may not be something that happens overnight, but there's probably going to be a change management process in order to get from where the organization currently is to where they are. With this 12-person organization, you're saving $1 million in overall cost. And so that could be quite impactful if your revenue is only in the $2 or $3 million range. What we can see here, though, is the current role compensation and what AI tools they're currently using, and then rolling those up to the kind of 5 roles that we've scoped earlier, the compensation for those roles, and what the AI tool spend is going to be. The final step is probably the least attractive for many people here, and that's actually looking at the existing employees and figuring out who is the best fit for these 5 new roles that we're going to have moving forward. And obviously with this one, it's a sad situation that we're going to go from 12 employees down to 5, which means 7 are not going to have a new role. I think in practice, what you're actually going to see is as you start to reduce the human part of some of the roles, you're actually going to create new roles elsewhere in the organization. And through natural attrition and training and skill development, you're actually going to be able to effectively reallocate a lot of people. And so it's not all doom and gloom, but we do want to be transparent about what's going to happen moving forward. So you can see here the transition plan. All we've done is taken the profile of the individual, matched it with a new role, just to try and figure out which of the skills match most closely. So the content strategist becomes the revenue strategist. You could argue that maybe the account executive might be a better fit there, or a customer success manager. But if the actual human part of the new role is most closely related to the content strategy, as opposed to what was traditionally by an AE or a CSM, then you can see why that may be more attractive. Again, this is not very comprehensive. It's really a very high-level analysis, but it's kind of a good way to get started thinking through this process. Your product designer is going to become your technical product builder, so design and dev. Maybe the design skills are really important to do human only, and then a lot of the coding is then automated or potentially outsourced. You've got your people ops specialist becoming the AI driven operations and people lead. But again, you're going from two people. Your HRBP now no longer has a role because the people ops, who maybe is more trained in AI, different product tools, is going to be a closer match to what's going to be needed moving forward. And then finally, senior software engineer moving to the AI platform and quality reliability lead. You think you've now got this product designer and the senior software engineer, and together they're actually building and developing the product moving forward. And you actually don't need a lot of these more traditional roles within the organization because a lot of that's been automated. We do have 4 roles here and then 4 roles here. So excuse my prior math, we are actually going from 12 down to 4, which is potentially even worse. So now we have these 4 new roles, 8 people who are going to be in the market, and this is a 2/3 headcount reduction. But it's actually done through a structured process. And this is exactly what a lot of organizations are going to be going through. Right now, going into 2026, as they're starting to think about how we use AI more frequently. Let's just do a quick comparison to another one I did just to show you that actually this is not a definitive guide on actually what's going to happen. So the same inputs, the same prompts and everything. Essentially what we came out with was a different set of roles. So this is 6 here. Anyone that's used ChatGPT knows that you can get multiple different variations of outcome at the end. Compensation here, you're still saving about $1 million. So again, if you imagine this is a $2 or $3 million revenue business and they're going to save $1 million, that's all profit, which is a huge impact to the business. The transition plan here is, we're going from 12 to 6. And so it's probably a little bit more realistic as to what a lot of companies are going to be going through. Realistically, when you think about how companies are going to manage attrition and how skill development is going to play a key part of this, and how maybe as the organization is growing, they're actually going to need to hire fewer people if this senior software engineer is able to upskill and go into one of these kind of different types of roles. So hopefully that was helpful. I actually think this is a huge opportunity to actually look at what are the new tasks that are going to be required for an organization moving forward. And if you're currently looking for a role, how can you actually position yourself to own these new tasks moving forward so that when companies are going through this exercise and trying to figure out where did the cost savings from automation come from, you're actually positioned in the best way possible to take advantage of these kind of new roles in these new profiles and don't get kind of caught left out. So hopefully that was helpful. Take care. Bye-bye.